Welcome to the Goat's Gravy, the ultimate podcast tailored for young professionals navigating the dynamic world of sales and sales leadership. We are here to serve up a blend of mentorship and advice. In each episode, we dive deep into conversations with accomplished leaders and rising stars in the sales industry. Together, we explore their triumphs, challenges, and invaluable experiences. Our goal? To distill their insights into practical lessons that can seamlessly integrate into your own career journey. So whether you're a seasoned sales expert or just starting out, join us as we ladle out wisdom and inspiration, empowering you to excel in the ever-evolving landscape of sales. Onward we go. Scotty, man, how exciting. Here we are with our first episode of the Goat's Gravy, the ultimate podcast tailored for young professionals navigating the dynamic world of sales and sales leadership. And you know what? Today's special because we have in studio with us one of our go-to mentors, Mr. George Shanine. Welcome, George.
Great, thanks.
Just to talk about George, he is a seasoned entrepreneur with an exceptional career that began at IBM, where he sold and led teams for more than 14 years. He then began a successful journey as the CEO at Aftermath Services, where he accelerated growth and achieved a successful exit. But he's ambitious. He didn't stop there. Now he's the driving force behind MedPro, revolutionizing the medical waste disposal industry. And George is not only a dedicated CEO, but also a board member, a venture capitalist, and he balances his professional life with his role as a great husband and a great father. Outside of the boardroom, he enjoys golf. I think he owns Scotty in the golf course. He also enjoys staying fit, and he has a passion for mentoring young professionals and old ones like Scott and I. So, Georgie, welcome to the podcast.
Guys, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's awesome.
George, you're the best. Really appreciate you coming in studio with us. Thank you.
This is a treat.
Right on. So I'm going to take you through a quick blast from the past when you and I met through my wife, Christy. All right, Christy was teaching.
Good story there.
Christy was teaching little George, and Christy said, "You got to meet this guy, George Shanine." And I said, "Hey, I'd love to meet him." And that's kind of where our relationship started, just through networking, through friends. So where we want to start is kind of IBM. You and I were talking early days about potentially joining IBM, and we had some conversations about that. But can you take us through our audience? A lot of these folks are younger in career, maybe in college, maybe transitioning first several years out of college. Take us through that journey for you as you exited college, and why did you pick IBM, and maybe your experiences with IBM?
Yeah. So we don't want to talk about the failure of not recruiting you, right?
Yeah.
It's a great question. When I graduated, it was an interesting time. There wasn't a ton of sales jobs back then, and everything was obviously different. In office, had to have a degree, had to have an idea what vertical you wanted to go into. And I was lucky because, we had interviewing happening on campus. And so IBM just so happened to be on campus. We had an interview. Didn't really have any plans for it. Liked what a gentleman by the name of Tom Altman, I still remember his name, was out there interviewing, told me about, what you do, what you can go learn and what you can go apply yourself and, what can happen from a trajectory perspective. And at that time, I was still thinking about going to law school. And, I was just going to go through the interview process. We had to do it to graduate. We had to get our credits in. But as I took the interview, I thought, you know what, I think I could actually do this. And that was the beginning for me.
Wow. Hey, and it's not very typical to stay at the company for 14 years. Obviously, your first role, usually you do a couple years and then you move on to that next sales opportunity. But obviously, something worked out really well. So just walk us through that journey of 14 years.
Yeah, but first I'm going to tell you a crazy story.
Let's hear it.
Okay,
Yep.
I don't know that I've ever told this story. So the first job I took was a database specialist. I was selling DB2 for IBM on the distributed platforms. We'd just come out with DB2 NT, which was we were primarily a mainframe product. And one of the first accounts they assigned me was Caterpillar. Downstate Illinois. I was in Chicago. I'm like, well, you grew up in Peoria, why not put you on State Farm, Caterpillar, John Deere? And I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. I get to go home and, visit family while I'm there, try to sell and learn stuff. And one of the first orders, I remember this like it was yesterday. I was competing. We had just got into the business intelligence space, and I was competing with one of the most senior guys in the area. He worked for a company of business objects, and he was literally the best, and everybody knew it. And I got the order. I beat him, and I couldn't believe it. And I walked up to, the lady's name was Jan Hobson. Remember it like it was yesterday. I go, Jan, I don't understand. Why did you choose IBM? She goes, well, I didn't. I go, what do you mean? She goes, George, I know you're going to do a good job. I'm like, Jan, you don't really know me. Pulls out a picture. True story. She used to work with my dad.
Oh, get out of here.
Who was also a DB2 relational database expert. Now, I lost my dad at the age of 10. I had no idea what he did for a living.
Wow. Get out of here.
How's that for
And it was
fate?
through a customer, you found that out.
True story.
Unbelievable.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
She gave me a picture of him. I still have it at my desk. I hang it up there. It's him in a lab coat. He worked for Caterpillar. He had an IBM lapel, and they were working on DB2 databases together.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So do you remember any, so that's a cool story. Your first win, was that your first win as a sales guy?
It was $125,000.
Wow. And do you remember any idea what your quota was back then?
No clue.
You just know you rolled past
No,
it.
I'm kidding. I do. It was $250,000.
That's a great start.
That is a good start.
So as you get the win, you got momentum. Can you give yourself a flashback again to our audience being younger in career? Back in that day, what were some of the things that as you reflect back on it, that made kind of the initial start of your sales career a good start?
People, right? I think part of being a great salesperson is you know that you're working with other people. And, really selling isn't selling, it's driving awareness. A lot of it was, for me, was learning, what is it that we have? What are you trying to do? How do we work together? I don't want to let anybody down. They don't want to be let down. That would be embarrassing. So I think early on in your sales career, it's really hard, especially if we're talking about younger people. What are you doing? Why are you selling it? How does that help somebody? What are the implications? If you get it wrong, what are the implications? And so you learn a lot through that, right? And it's a lot less about the products, because I think most companies, especially most organizations, you have technical experts, subject matter experts, senior folks. If you're a junior rep and they're bringing you on, there's knowledge in there, right? It's on you to make sure that you bring those people to bear, but you got to be asking the right questions. And that's what I got early on in my career is, if you do this, how is that going to help you? Whether it was cost savings, accelerating a project, fulfilling something that they've had on their strategic vision board. We were selling IT. IT was expensive back then, especially complicated. You had to have specialized resources. So from a selling perspective, you really had to understand, what am I doing? How is that going to help you? And you have to learn from that.
Yeah.
Was there one person that you kind of looked up to early on that maybe embraced you and helped kind of pull you along, or did you seek out mentorship? Maybe walk us through how you accelerated your
There's
pathway.
two people. I would say early on, there's a gentleman by the name of John Sheehan, and he was about as smart as they come. And I tell you, I'd sit in presentations and I wanted to be technical. And he would, back then they used this thing called foils. You guys know what foils are?
I remember hearing about foils.
Nobody else will.
I hate to admit it, I remember.
Yeah. So he'd go through his foils, and these are guys, before technology existed, you had a light projector and you'd have printed plastic papers that would project onto the board. And I remember he would go through these foils with detailed notes for everybody and explain things, how did databases work, et cetera. I learned so much from him, and he was so patient in giving his time. And I didn't know this about myself, but I was a visual learner. So that really helped me figure out, how do I learn? I needed to see things. I needed to see things written down. I needed to see, how you would start and how you would finish. And that was, to me, invaluable. If you put me in front of a textbook and you asked me to go take a test, I'd probably score well. I'd forget it 2 days from now.
Yeah.
So it really made that training indelible. And then he'd make me go out there and do it. And, just face plant going out there for the first couple times. And what that taught me was, better rehearse.
Yeah.
Better know what you're talking about.
Well, you're a guy that has a plan, obviously, but speaking of that, was there ever one big adversity you faced during those 14 years that stands out, and how did you manage through that adverse moment?
There's one situation that sticks out to me. I was assigned to the large airline here in Chicago, and we had worked, we were competing against Teradata. They flew in their CEO. They outsold me, and I had put everything. I mean, the entire year, my entire quota, we had just purchased a house, and I'd really dedicated myself thinking, we have the best industry expertise, we have the best people, we have the best solution, we have the best price, we can accelerate, my team is local, this is what we do. We had a whole bunch of other reference accounts, and we had the A team lined up. And I remember being told, no, you lost. And it taught me a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I ended up going back and winning it. But it taught me, don't put all your eggs in one basket. As a young salesperson, and I coach this to this day, you got to really have a good balanced approach and understanding what's a pipeline. What are you trying to do? If it's a good fit, do you have a lot of them? And how do you repeat that versus holding on? I call it holding on to that steering wheel a little too hard.
Yep.
You're going to oversteer. You're going to get nervous. And then you're not really servicing anybody well because you need it versus is it the right solution?
So I'd like to get into the transition from as an individual.
By the way, that was the first and only time I got thrown out of a CEO's office.
Okay. First and only.
First and only.
Was that the same CEO you went back and did a deal with, or later? Or no?
It was.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, actually, I saw
you rebounded.
It was the chief operating officer, but yeah.
So I want to talk about mentors because I think a lot of the folks that are going to tune in want to really understand how you get to mentorship. So in my career, you're so focused on selling, you oftentimes don't have time to create those mentors to take you to the next level.
Yeah.
Any advice for our audience on how you go seek out mentors? Because oftentimes they're not seeking you out. So how do you get your mindset where you've got a job to do, but yet that mentorship is so invaluable? How do you get to that point?
It's a really good question. I would say most people are more giving than you think. And I think most successful people enjoy helping other people. So I think there's a lot of untapped mentors out there, right? And I think there's a balance between listening to one individual and their way versus varying it up and talking to a lot of people and making your own assessments when you're trying to do things. But in general, you just got to go up and ask questions. Hey, what do you think? Kind of like we're having a conversation today. I think, what I've learned is people are incredibly giving of their time and their knowledge, and they enjoy doing it. I think we just got to get comfortable asking questions.
Yep.
Don't be weird about it, right? Hey, will you be my mentor? That's weird.
Yep.
Can you give me some advice?
You've been pretty generous to us with your time, and you've certainly helped me specifically with career decisions. As the CEO, right, and you're the chief seller really for an organization as you made that transition. What are some of the things you do to ensure that your sales organization has mentors and people are developing and growing? And is that something that you're intentional about, or do you just leave that up to your leaders?
So I've got a great leader, right, who's our president. He grew up with me at IBM. Very fortunate. His name's Dan Hansen. He's just an excellent human being, great mentor. I really trust him to do the selling. So I kind of hung up my selling shoes years ago. But what I would say that he does more than anybody else that I've ever worked with is he dishes it out straight. Here's what you have to do. Here's why you have to do it. I would say we're pretty hardcore when it comes to selling in the sense that we're going to be honest with you. We're going to tell you about the metrics. We're going to tell you what you need to do. We're going to look for incremental improvements on a regular basis. It causes a lot of churn in our business, right? But I think, we preach it all the time. There's never a sucker punch, meaning you're going to know where you're at. You know what you're doing. You know what you got to work on. And then a lot of that just gets back down to the individual. Do you want to learn? Do you want to absorb it? Do you want to apply it? I talk to my reps. I would say, some of the best practices are understanding how many times do you have at-bats, meaning how many times you get a chance to talk to customers. Of that, you're going to learn way more from the deals that you don't get, you don't progress, than the stuff that you do.
Yep.
And one of the things I think Dan and I have worked on very hard over the years is just being incredibly transparent with people. We have an open ERP/CRM implementation. Everybody can see everybody else's information. You can look at, our top leaders. We've got two guys have been with us forever, and I think they set the standard, and they're very honest, right? Here's what's going to work. Here's what's not going to work. They don't waste their time on stuff, and they're very just kind of open and honest about what we need to do, how we need to do it. But I think as a young salesperson, it's super important to understand enablement is there. Mm-hmm. You have to seek it out because there is no textbook, right? We got a ton of books here. They're all great. There's no situationally aware sales process. It's a customer dependent sales process.
Right.
You got to learn your craft.
Yeah. So transitioning, as you look at your salespeople, they might be great individual contributors. So some of our audience might be sitting there saying, maybe I just want to be a salesperson my whole career, which would be totally fine. What do you look at when you look at a great individual contributor? Any advice to people that are looking to make that leap into a leadership role in sales? Like, what does that look like to you as a leader? And I'm just trying to understand what advice you'd give someone. Do you pull someone along to say you should be a sales leader? But what does that transition?
Or is there specific criteria you lay out to them?
This is my experience. Some of the greatest sales guys and sales gals are not great sales managers.
Great.
And, the reality is what makes a great sales leader and a sales professional is somebody that gets dopamine out of helping other people. They really enjoy and understand, for me to be great as a leader, I've got to make other people even better than me. And then they're incredibly giving of their time, their knowledge, and then they care more about that person being successful than themselves. Those people, I've got Dan, those people make unbelievable sales leaders.
Yeah. Assuming the sales organization is the heartbeat of your organization overall, what are the attributes, skills, the traits that you look for in a salesperson?
Yeah, that's a great question. Honesty, integrity, right? I mean, we preach this all the time. So the heartbeat for us is our customers. I always tell my reps, listen, I don't pay your bills. Our customers pay your bills. So first and foremost, don't mislead them. Don't misrepresent. Be honest. Have a lot of integrity, because there's no point in winning if it's not a good win. In a lot of industries, like, hey, push for the sale, push for the sale. It's really different in that we push for drive the awareness, let them know how we're different, let them make an informed decision, then focus on what we enjoy today, a 97% client retention rate in a very competitive market. So, when I'm looking for great salespeople, they got to want it, right? I'm a big fan of EOS and Gino Wickman. You got to get it, want it. They got to have the capacity to do it, right? And a lot of that is internalized, meaning they really have to have the drive.
Yeah. So as you work with Dan, you probably see a lot of common mistakes made by newer salespeople.
Yeah.
Can you talk to those?
That's a broad topic.
Yeah.
Because there's so many people to listen to. And, I would say when you come in with a blank canvas and open and you're trying to understand what it is that we do and what it is that we sell, more importantly, what it is that we're trying to do and accomplish with clients, you move away from selling. And a lot of the mistake is, hey, I got to make my number. Mm-hmm. I got to make this, I got to get this sale. No, what you got to do is really understand what it is that we have to offer. What's your addressable market? How many people need it? And then go find the fit. Right. And so what I see the biggest mistake is not understanding and not learning from their mistakes. Right. So again, I preach it regularly. I know I said it earlier. You're going to learn a lot more when things don't happen in your, to your favor. Yep. Versus, just winning deals.
Do you have something in mind where maybe early on you made a mistake and you learned from that and you applied that into this world now as a leader of your organization?
I make mistakes every day. I'm a true believer that, if you can start to get perspective and learn and be open-minded, I know you got the Stephen Covey book here, right? Sharpening the Saw. I'm a huge believer, right? So I don't think you ever stop learning. I don't believe there's anything called sales mastery, right? I think you can get better at your craft, but you got to constantly be open-minded and learn.
How about risk reward? If you look back at your career, obviously you're someone that you took some risks. You left IBM, maybe walk through a risk that didn't work out for you, and then maybe a risk that did work out for you. And then a follow-up is just, what would you advise people if they're going to make that take a risk on a job or a role? What's the criteria they need to look at?
Yeah. So if I tailor that response towards younger people, here's kind of what I'd be thinking about. You have a lot of people that are pontificators, right? Hey, open up your own business, take the risk. Why work for the man? Screw this hard corporate job. I don't want to do that. I want to have a life, and I'm going to become an entrepreneur. I have this old saying, it's probably very unpopular. Those that do, those that don't, teach and coach, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a reason for that. And there's not a bad reason for it. But if you're going to do and you want to learn, you should let somebody else pay for your education while you're getting educated versus asking your friends, family, taking a bunch of risk with your own money. If somebody's willing to employ you and teach you skills, they're taking risk on you. You're going to get educated. You're going to get, I would say, normalized in terms of understanding what a professional workforce is, what a professional sales cycle is. Too many people are chasing the entrepreneurship dream and not looking at, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that want to hire salespeople, and that's like getting a free MBA. It's actually better. You're getting paid to go learn. Yeah. And then if you're really good, guess what? And you're a really good salesperson, you can leverage their money, their platform, their insight, and they will help you go grow, and you'll accelerate your career. Now, there'll be a point where you may want to decide, like I did, you know what, I've got 14 years underneath my belt. I'm ready to go out on my own, hang my own shingle, partner up, and apply those skills. And I caught all of it on the back end and then some, right? But I think, when you think about risk and reward, it's got to be with the end in mind. Another Covey discipline or habit, right? I think people need to be a little bit more mindful of how much opportunity there is out there and how much they can accelerate that. And the real risk is not investing in yourself and not getting good advice.
Yeah. So George, we all have kids, and we want to set up our kids, maybe their friends, some of those folks listening here. What is the criteria? So back in the day, there was an IBM, a Xerox, some of these big training grounds. The world's changed a little bit. Maybe that looks like Google, that looks like Amazon now today, or some big med device companies. What advice would you give our audience as far as criteria that they should consider before they make that first, maybe that second job? What is really important to actually sink their teeth into that first or second role? What's the criteria that you'd give your son or my son or some of the audience out here?
That's a loaded question. So, I'll share the advice I shared with my son. So he had went to Indiana University, great school, great opportunities coming out of that. Came back to Chicago, and he had more than a handful of opportunities to go pursue. And I told him, take the job that gives you the best opportunity to learn the most from highly ethical and people with integrity. Yeah. Because that's what you're going to want to go learn, which is what are the disciplines that you need to have to be highly successful. Now, if you go work, and I won't name any names, but they were big six consulting type firms, right? You're going to learn a ton. You're going to be acclimated to unbelievable people with unbelievable resources. However, they've got a really big business to run. And you're probably not going to get any access to the senior leadership team. You're not really going to see how they work. And I told him, hey, he had a chance. I said, he had a chance to make over $100,000 coming out of college, which was a huge number,
Absolutely.
Right? Huge number. Take the job for $45,000. He goes, Dad, why would I do that? I go, well, and I showed him the long tail, right? Mm-hmm. You got to be investing to get skills. And I talk about this endlessly with people that I mentor. You got two types of opportunities. The one that looks like this, where you have the linear growth and kind of the stair step every 12 to 18 months, you get promoted. You go to another company, you make a lot of money, and by the time you're 30, you're killing it. Then you take that same person who has kind of like this, zigzag line, falls below the line in terms of, if you think of the x-axis and y-axis as promotions, earnings / time. You compare it to the person that's linear to the person that, 6-7 years in, it looks like they're not really going anywhere. And they got a whole bunch of, backwards career progressions, losses, deals, been a rep for 6 or 7 years. I'm going to take that latter person every single time, because what they're learning is how to actually manage through adversity. Yep. They're sticking with it. They're becoming experts at it. And when it's time to go lead, they actually have the experience to lead others. Whereas sometimes, and I don't want to over categorize, sometimes you shortchange yourself with the easy short-term decision. We all know about deferred gratification. You got to invest in yourself. If it's easy for a reason.
Yeah. That's great. And this is gold, by the way. This is great advice. I could listen to you all day. Maybe just for the audience, what are some things you would recommend for self-development, whether it's podcast, certain influencers to follow, reading books? What are the things that you think can help someone in terms of career growth just to own?
It's great. I'm going to put a warning out there first. Know your source, right? I think there's a lot of people trying to help people legitimately. There's a lot of people trying to monetize, right? And so, we're obviously on a podcast today. We're not trying to monetize this. We're trying to do this because we love helping young people. You got to know your source. Why are you listening to this individual? Who are they? Where did they come from? Where was their training? What's their success rate? Who are they, right? And why should you listen to them? And then when you move beyond that, right, what do you actually do? The oldies are goodies, right? If you really look at writers and books and so forth, handful of books. I walked in, I saw 7 or 8 of them that I've read, and they're still good. Actually, my favorite is by far Stephen Covey's Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. Yeah. And the older I get, the more I come back and say, man, did he nail that, right? And I remember,
makes a lot of sense.
I remember getting handed that book in training school, blue suit, white shirt, red tie, wingtips, and you kind of got it back then. But if you really look at things, I saw you have Who Moved My Cheese. Oh yeah. There's some goodies, and they're popular for a reason because the people did the work. Know your source, know the author, look at their body of work. Is it their opinion, or did they do the work? Meaning, did you do the interview of 1,000+ successful people?
Dude, that's awesome.
All my knowledge, by the way, I stole it from all these people, right? I just tried to become a student.
Well, you're good at application. That's for sure. So, and obviously we want you to be part of this ongoing if you're willing to do it. This is episode 1, and getting you even once a quarter would be awesome. But before we wrap today, is
We're
there anything
recruiting,
else?
by the way, so I've got a hidden
absolutely,
alternative here.
Absolutely. So maybe talk a little bit about that. If you want to share anything about what you're currently doing as an organization.
I think, I think the other thing is just for advice and skills, you gotta ask people questions. Like we're having this conversation as a young adult, you got to ask a whole bunch of people, right? Don't be afraid to ask questions. What would you do if you were me? What are things that I should be doing? What are things that I'm going to be reading? Because the real knowledge comes from asking questions from a lot of people, then getting your own determination of what do you think you'd be best at based off of what resonated the most for you.
Right.
Yeah. When you talk about enablement, George, just real quick, the younger audience out here, they might look at me funny if I say to read a book.
Yeah.
Like, what are you talking about? What's a book? So now we've got podcasts.
That's slightly insulting, by the way.
I know. Well, we're a little bit old, Billy. You know that. But you're younger sellers. Is there any trends that you're seeing on how they develop themselves, or any advice that you'd give them or that Dan gives them? Do you categorize enablement? Just kind of a general question. I'm just wondering what you've seen from younger sellers and just enablement in general.
Yeah, that's a very, we could have a whole episode about that, because I think everybody always asks me, hey, what books would I read?
Yeah.
And I always tell them, well, you're not ready to read the books, right? And here's why. You have to have, in my view, you've got to have a little bit of a fire in your belly and know what you want to do. You've got to be curious. So when you ask the question, you're actually trying to understand the answer, right? And you got to be conscientious. And when you're young, it's really hard to be conscientious because you don't have any perspective yet, right? And so reading books by experts, right? To this day, when I read a book, I get so much more out of it than I did 15 years ago. And now I look back at my younger self, I'm like, I didn't know anything, right? And back then, you couldn't tell me I didn't know anything because I was crushing my number,
right?
You're ranking number 1, number 2 in a global organizations of tens of thousands of sellers. You think you know a lot. Mm-hmm. The reality is a lot of people retire. They've had a successful career. You come back, they write these books. They're unbelievable. But if I were younger, ask questions you actually want the answers to.
Genuine curiosity. Yeah.
You will learn.
Yeah. We've just got some topics that we want to rip through. I'm a big believer in the basics of sales, and we've got some topics we'd love to get some color on from you. So first one, the core of every salesperson is your function to create pipeline and prospect and drive demand. Just as an overall topic, when you're talking about driving pipeline, what comes to mind, and what do you tell your young sellers as it relates to driving pipeline?
Loaded question.
I'm good at that.
Yeah. It's hard. It's different in every industry. It's different in every vertical. What worked 10 years ago, pick up the directories, pick up the phone and make phone calls. It's hard, right? People have caller ID block. Mm-hmm. People are busy. We're understaffed. People are working home at remote. But when I think about pipeline, it really has to be kind of a multi-channel, omnipresent type of event where, what's your addressable market, what's your region, what's your territory, who's your target. You got to start with knowing what your total universe is. Then you got to figure out who cares, right? I mean, if you're going to try to go directly to your decision maker, they're busy, right? So why are they going to listen to you? What's different, and how are you going to get there? And if you're new and you're young, you don't have a lot of connections. So referral selling is going to be tough. And so that's why I think you have to have a very balanced approach. There's a ton of AI tools out there today. There's a ton of, what I'd call prospecting, demand generation, lead generation tools out there. But there's really no shortcut. You're going to have to put in a lot of effort, right? So it's a little bit of everything. It's emailing, it's LinkedIn, it's calling, it's going to shows, it's showing up to conferences, it's networking, which people don't like to do. And then really at the end of the day, you got to make yourself aware, and you got to provide value, content that people want to read and that they're going to distribute because it's meaningful, and you're going to help somebody with that content.
We're going to have a guest on actually coming up here, Billy, Paul Knox, who while he's in college, Billy and I spent some time with this gentleman, and he's making hundreds of calls a day while he's in college. And I think to myself, when I was in college, I wasn't making hundreds of calls. I was doing some other things, maybe studying.
Nothing nefarious.
Maybe not. But back to your point, it's the hard work. It's the hours that you're going to put in. It's the grit. It's just that down and dirty energy.
The number one answer, I'll just give it to you. In my view, find the 5 most successful people in your business, shadow them.
Yep.
Figure it out.
Love
Where
that.
did you get your business? Shadow them, right? You can get a shortcut really quick.
Good point.
All right, Georgie, just give us your thoughts around, by the way, thanks for letting me call you Georgie, only because
I was
Scott's
just
here.
thinking about that.
I haven't really earned that yet. George, your view on networking in general, you said a lot of people don't like to do it. That served me well. There's a book called Never Eat Alone.
Yeah.
I read early on in my career, and I think that served me really well to always follow up, always stay connected. I don't think I've interviewed for a job in the last 15 years.
Why would you?
Right.
You know?
It's your network.
So love that question. 2 points. If you have a resume, you failed to network. Never had one. Never will.
Well,
You don't have one? Never will. Shouldn't have one. And here's why. So many people are willing to help people out. Networking is very interesting to me. Don't be weird. Hey, you guys want to network? That's not the way that it works. Show up, ask questions, and I go back to be curious. Ask questions you actually want to get the answers to, and then figure out what it is that you think you're going to be good at. Because once you get all those answers, you're going to be able to have an educated conversation. You're going to differentiate yourself, right? Or you're going to go put your resume on Indeed and take whatever job opportunity comes up, right? So the person that's hitting me up in LinkedIn, they don't have a resume. Hey, Mr. Shanine, I know I don't deserve an interview and I'm not asking for an interview, but if I come over and have a cup of coffee, would you mind? Would you have 5 minutes? And I'd just like to ask you what you did early on in your sales career. I'm taking that meeting.
Yeah.
Right? By the way, I didn't ask for the resume. The fact that he found me or she found me on LinkedIn and wants to have a cup of coffee, I want that person.
Yeah. So
that's great.
Going back to Paul Knox for a second, this guy is, while he's in college, is reaching out to me multiple times a week. Billy, multiple times a week. I'm just floored by his ability to network and how quickly this is sinking into him. So as we try to teach on how to network in your younger in career, is there a certain amount of time you should spend a day? Like, how do you break it down for younger in career folks to get that thing going to its basic function?
This is, I would say this is one of the fundamental problems with young salespeople, which is they find a handful of opportunities or accounts that they want to go penetrate, and then they overcommit. And I've done that in my career as well. You got to have balance, right? And so a lot of it is structure. You know, everybody talks about PhD, poor, hungry, driven, and we're just going to grind. It doesn't work that way. Certainly you have to work hard, but you got to work really smart. When you combine those two, and I know it's very cliche, now you get balance, right? And when you're prospecting, you're learning. Mm-hmm. Well, why didn't you choose me? Why don't you want to talk? Well, here's why. Well, and that just makes you better when you're talking to actual prospects, right?
I love it. Let's switch gears to interviewing for a second. So my son's at the University of Alabama, and he's going through some interviews, and I'm trying to teach him the basics of interviewing. Any advice for our younger and career folks that maybe haven't had an interview before? Just, again, focusing on the very basics of before you get to that interview and maybe after that interview.
Yeah. I'm going to delineate this for professional interviewees, right? So these are people that are professionals. Let's just disregard this comment. But when you're young, show up prepared, right? Show up prepared. What does that mean? Have your list of questions.
Yeah.
What are you curious about? What are the questions? Where are you going to catch the interviewer off guard? So many kids show up. They got their resume, they got their LinkedIn profile, they got a couple projects from college. I say, do you have any questions? Yeah, what's the culture like here? Okay, that's a question. How does that help you? Right? You got to have more questions than the interviewer. And you got to have that level of, I'm curious, I'm conscious, I know what kind of company it is, where could I help, why would I be successful? Come in with a list of 20 questions, badger them, and I promise you will differentiate yourself from 99% of the candidates that are sitting in that office that didn't do any research.
That's right.
Right?
And not what's my territory and what's the comp plan. If you get the offer, you can talk about that later. Don't ask that early.
Yeah, listen, younger, you're not ready to answer, they're not interviewing you off of, I'm not. qualifying questions. You're not qualified to qualify me.
Right.
But if you showed me, you went to the website, you asked some competitive questions, you think you understand the differentiation, you're asking me to pitch me why I should work at MedPro in terms of what makes me great. Now, you put the interviewing on me as the interviewer. Tell me what's different about MedPro. You just got my attention.
Yeah.
Now we're having a conversation, not sweating and what's going to be like? What time do I have to show up? Right. Things that turn off. What's your benefit plan look like? Okay. Wrong answers.
So George, I got a quick story for you. I was a sales rep, one of my first sales rep jobs at UPS. And we went through
I'm just imagining you in those shorts right now. Not a good look.
Brown shorts and
It's better than the mascot outfit he wore.
Yeah. So we went to all this training about asking questions. So I wanted to put that training into practice. So I was in Schaumburg, Illinois with a prospect. And I had my questions, like you said, I had them written out. I probably had 30 of them written out. I rifled 30 questions in a row at this guy until he cried uncle. He goes, "What are you doing? How many questions are you going to ask me?" And I was rapid fire. So there wasn't, I think my questioning was
don't
accurate,
do that. Don't do that.
But it wasn't conversational.
Right.
So back to your networking piece, I think if you can get comfortable networking, it's going to be natural for you to ask questions, listen, respond with something intelligent to get that more natural flow.
Yeah.
Versus me, I machine gunned this poor guy, and he pretty much threw me out of his office.
Well, this is actually a great topic because if you're curious, you're going to ask really good questions and you're going to be listening, and then it's going to turn into a conversation. If you just go in and say, "Hey, I got to have 30 questions, so I came up prepared." Listen, that just doesn't get it done.
Yeah.
You talked about preparation for an interview, but how about even for yourself going to a big customer meeting? What kind of preparation do you do?
I hate to say this, but I don't do that anymore, right? And it's only because I trust my partners and the people that do that. I think we've trained them to be really good. I mean, we have a customer first mentality.
Yeah, how do you teach them in terms of a pre-call plan and go into a meeting ready to go?
So we have a very regimented approach, which is just be honest, be upfront, let them know. We call it right sizing, right? Like, what do they need? What can we offer? And if they're already in a good situation, we tell them, "Hey, listen, we can't help you. Stay there." And we have found the more honest that you are, we tell them what our value proposition is. We kind of, there's a Cadillac in the marketplace. We have Cadillac level services at about a 20-25% discount to market. And we tell them how we accomplish that and what the differences are. But then we come back to the differentiators, which is, and here's where we invest, and this is how it helps you, but not only in the short term from a value proposition. Here's our strategy as an organization. This is how it helps you. We call it a business value assessment. But ultimately, we're trying to right size it. And we don't really do anything outside that, because one of the things we've made a conscious decision is to never take on something we can't deliver on. Right. Ultimately, if we're going to have a client and they've trusted us with their service, we'd like to be in a relationship with them forever.
Right.
And to do that means we got to be really upfront from the get-go, and we've got to drive a really good bargain for them. Or, the reality is attrition rates in our industry are about 30%. They're going to go back out to market, and when they go out to market, we want to still show up on top because we earned that business and we took care of that client. And when you start to feed that into people, they don't try to take bad deals. It doesn't make sense.
Yep. So I want to bring up another topic, George, is follow-up. So a good friend of ours, Tim Frank.
Yep. Timmy.
One of my mentors. I was his mentor. Then he quickly flipped vice versa. And he was a huge follow-up freak. So we talk about a sales call, and Tim would ask me a question.
It's funny because he never follows up with me.
So he said, "Scott, when do you do the follow-up?" I said, "Next day, morning." I was all over. He goes, "No, you're missing the point. Same day follow-up is gold." Any best practices, or what comes to mind when you think of the term follow-up? Maybe when someone's calling on you, or back to your young and career sales folks.
It's such a differentiator.
Big time.
I know to this day who followed up with me and who didn't. Mm-hmm. If it's an interviewee especially, right, who followed up. As a sales rep, you had a conversation, you have additional collateral, you can summarize it, you can demonstrate you were listening intently. The quality of your follow-up is as important as the frequency and the timing of your follow-up. Again, if you care and you're conscious, you're trying to take care of somebody and the client, you're not selling, You're solutioning. I know that's an old school terminology, but follow-up's absolutely critical. It demonstrates you're listening, and it demonstrates that you caught the salient points, and it demonstrates that is what it's going to be like working with me.
Yeah. So as a best practice, Billy, I'm sure you've, interviewing people and hiring people. I love when someone, to your point, George, thank you for the time. Here's what we hit, and bullet, like to show that person that you're listening. Here's what we talked about, and here are the follow-up items, just clean bullets. As someone who hires people, that is gold to me, because I'm trying to make the translation. How are they going to act with our clients?
Right. That's exactly right. By the way, you got to work on your follow-up.
Thank you. I do my best.
All right, we got 4 more for you, George, and we're going to let you go. Self-development. We talked a little bit about that on the main podcast, but just any thoughts around self-development? Additional thoughts, maybe?
I would argue 90-10 rule. 90% of your success is going to be dependent on how much you invest in yourself. So what's self-development? Investing in yourself, learning, honing your craft, investing. Investing doesn't have to cost you money. It has to cost you time and mental capacity, right? So why aren't I doing these things right? Why aren't these things happening for me? Why am I at the bottom of the pack? Why aren't I getting a job? Why am I not getting any prospecting? And again, learning from not succeeding is the best indelible type of learning you can go get. So you have to invest in yourself. And by the way, everything's free now, right? Books, summaries, AI, ask the question. It's right there. It's right there. It's free.
Yeah.
So oftentimes high-performing sales reps get caught up in the deal, the next deal, and they're frantically moving around. What's the percentage of time that you would give an advice to a young seller to invest back into themselves?
Yeah. That's, I don't know. Because I think, let me answer that a different way. There's a definite difference between somebody that is investing in themselves because they care about it, and they're going to read content. I'm going to use a marketing example. So I've worked with a lot of marketers over my career, and there are people that came from the old school of marketing, and then there's a new school of marketing. It's very clear, radio, TV, pre-digital, print, direct mailers. And I interview a lot of these people over the years, and they haven't crossed that digital chasm. And it's very clear they haven't stayed up with it, because what used to work has always worked until it doesn't work. Mm-hmm. And then by the time you're trying to slip in, you don't have all the wins, and you're interviewing, you don't have those skill sets. And then you have to try to take a job where we're paying to train you. So I think it's a continual process. I will tell you, every day I sit down with my president, and we talk about self-development and self-improvement, not only as men and as human beings, but what are we learning from our failures? And this is one of my favorite topics, and it's a tough one. It's kind of weird, right? But if you want to go from good to great, you have to invest in yourself. And if you really want to go from good to great to world class, you got to work on your weaknesses. Everybody likes to work on, hey, this is the skill. I got a reverse jam tomahawk with my right hand. Great. Can you do it with your left? Right? Think about Kevin Durant. Right? Yeah. He became unstoppable when he had both sides, right? And there's this thing of, you have to work in that, I call it the negative 5%, if you want to be excellent, right? And that really means sometimes you're working in the negative more than you're working in the positive. But at the end of it, that's how you start to really fill the gaps to become incredible.
That's great advice. Really good. You touched on this for a moment, but maybe transitioning to social selling, right? You have LinkedIn, you have these platforms. You were saying earlier, people reach out to you on LinkedIn. A great opportunity for us to go sell and connect with people. But just overall, what's your take on social selling?
So one, I'm terrible at it. I don't do it, but I will tell you who I respond to. Right. And so a lot of people think that, selling to Vito is antiquated and archaic. It's not. We have
that book somewhere.
Yeah, it's not. Right. So, I get emails to this day, LinkedIn requests to this day, maybe not as much LinkedIn, but certainly emails. If somebody hits my in basket, I have a million filters on there. So one, if they got my information, they have a resonating message, they sent me something good in the subject line, I'm going to open it up. I'm interested.
Right.
How did you get my email? How did you know I was looking at this point in time? And heck, what tool are you using so we can use it too?
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm going to take the call. You did the work.
Is a lot of the calls that you take, a lot of people want to sell to you. How important is it to network into you? And you might say, hey, I know you, George, from my network.
Yeah.
Is that something that you take in consideration when you look at something and you want to dig in?
No.
Or it's more about the message resonating based on them doing their homework?
No. So if you're networking into me, I don't really want to take that meeting.
Okay.
I can't tell you why. I just feel it's disingenuous a lot of times.
Okay.
Now, if it's because, hey, this person's looking for help and advice / recommendations, love to do it. But I don't want to be sold to as referral marketing.
Okay.
Setup, right?
Yeah.
However, when somebody does hit all those earlier points of they got my info, they got my subject line, they know my pain point, that's my education. I'm taking the call as much for my own benefit as them trying to sell me. Because again, part of sharpening the saw is maybe they know something I don't know. I haven't looked at that topic for a year and a half. We live in a world where I think it was Moore's Law, every 18 months, technology doubles. With AI, I think the number is something astronomical, like once every month, you're getting 18 months worth of new product and development, and it's scary fast. So you got to be open-minded to take that.
I think a really big priority for my organization is human-centric selling. And so kind of like what you experience, you get people sending cold emails, cold calling you. How do you kind of share with your sales organization how to build authentic relationships with the customers right off the get-go?
You got to be yourself. You got to think about that. It's not, I don't think there's a singular answer for that. And I think it's always situational dependent, which I know is the most generic answer on earth. But, what are you calling for? Why are you calling and why should they talk to you, right? What are you doing for them? It's not about what they can do for you. What can you do for them? And why should they take time out of their busy day to listen to you? And, what did you do to warm up that conversation, whether it was advertising, mailing? I know we just said we don't like referral marketing, but what are the things that you did to deserve that time with them? And how are you going to get to the point already? The worst thing I hate is when people get on the phone and they're blabbering for 20 minutes. I'm like, hey, listen, how can we help each other? How can I help you? How can you help me? Get to it.
Right. Get to it. Dude, that's awesome. Well, man, thank you so much for spending time with us. We really enjoyed it.
This is great. This is fun.
You're the best, man.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
My pleasure.
And that brings us to the end of another episode of The Goat's Gravy. We've shared some awesome insights and strategies aimed at enhancing your journey in sales. And the conversation does not have to stop here. So be sure to follow us on social media at The Goat's Gravy and explore more at thegoatsgravy.com. Your journey towards sales mastery is ongoing, and we're here to support you at every step. So thank you for tuning in today. Stay curious, stay driven, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care.